Alfred looked at Penelope's tear-stained face, her water breaking on his imported Persian rug, and sneered. "I'm not taking a fat, useless cow to the hospital. You're ruining my evening." He threw her out into the freezing rain. He thought she'd die. Instead, the city's most dangerous man found her. The first contraction hit Penelope like a freight train, tearing through her lower abdomen with a ferocity that stole the breath from her lungs. She gripped the edge of the absolute black granite kitchen island, her knuckles turning white. The penthouse at 15 Central Park West was completely silent, save for the rhythmic, agonizing pounding of her own heart and the faint sound of jazz drifting from the master suite down the hall. Her name was Penelope. She was 26 years old, 38 weeks pregnant, and terrified. She had always been a bigger woman. Even on her wedding day, she proudly wore a size 18 gown, comfortable in her skin. But her husband, Alfred Pendleton, a billionaire hedge fund manager who had married her solely to secure her late father's vast commercial real estate portfolio, had spent the last 2 years systematically destroying her self-worth. During her pregnancy, her weight had climbed to nearly 280 pounds. Alfred didn't see a woman carrying his child. He saw an embarrassment. "Alfred!" she screamed, the pain overriding her fear of his notorious temper. "Alfred, it's time." The heavy oak door of the master suite swung open. Alfred emerged, wearing the crisp Tom Ford dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, holding a crystal glass of Macallan 25. But he wasn't alone. Trailing behind him, wearing Penelope's pure silk La Perla robe, was Camilla. She was a 22-year-old fitness model with zero body fat, sharp cheekbones, and a cruel smile. "Stop screeching, Penelope," Alfred snapped, taking a slow sip of his scotch. He looked down at the puddle of amniotic fluid, pooling on the $1 million antique Persian rug beneath her bare feet. His upper lip curled in profound disgust. "Look what you've done. That rug is from the 17th century. The baby," she gasped, her legs trembling so violently she thought she would collapse under her own weight. "Alfred, please. Call the driver. We need to go to Mount Sinai now." Camilla let out a high, tinkling laugh. "Oh, Alfred, look at her. She's sweating like a pig." "It's repulsive." Alfred didn't reprimand her. Instead, he stepped closer to Penelope, his cold blue eyes raking over her heavy, swollen form. "I'm not taking you anywhere. I have a private gala at the Pierre Hotel tonight, and I am not walking into the lobby with a fat, waddling whale leaking fluids all over the marble." You can't be serious," she sobbed, another contraction ripping through her, forcing her to her knees. The physical pain was blinding, but the emotional blade he was twisting in her chest hurt worse. "It's your child. It's a parasite you're carrying, and frankly, I'm done playing house," Alfred said coldly. He had already transferred all of her family's assets into his offshore holding companies through a series of legal loopholes she had blindly signed. She was no longer of any use to him. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Davis." Within seconds, Alfred's massive head of security, a man named Davis, stepped into the living room. "Get this disgusting cow out of my penthouse," Alfred ordered, turning his back on her to pour another drink for Camilla. "Throw her on the street. If she tries to come back in, have the building concierge call the police for trespassing." "Alfred, no. I have no money. I have nothing." She begged, humiliated, as Davis grabbed her by her upper arm. His grip was like a steel vice. "You should have thought about that before you let yourself get so disgustingly fat," Alfred's voice echoed behind her as Davis dragged her toward the private elevator. "Don't ever contact me again." The elevator doors closed, sealing her fate. Davis didn't say a word as they descended the 50 floors. He dragged her out the service entrance, bypassing the glamorous lobby, and shoved her out the heavy metal doors into the unforgiving October night. It was pouring rain, the kind of freezing, torrential New York downpour that cut straight to the bone. She hit the wet pavement hard, scraping her knees, her heavy body jarring with the impact. She was wearing nothing but a thin maternity nightgown and bare feet. She had no phone, no purse, no ID, just the agonizing, tearing pain in her stomach. She tried to flag down a cab on Broadway, waving her arms frantically, but they drove right past her, splashing freezing puddle water onto her legs. Who would stop for a soaked, screaming, morbidly obese woman in a nightgown? Another contraction hit, closer this time, 3 minutes apart. The baby was coming. She dragged herself down an alleyway in Hill's kitchen, seeking shelter from the biting wind under a rusted fire escape. She collapsed into a pile of discarded cardboard boxes, the dirty water soaking through her clothes. She was going to die here. Her baby was going to die in a filthy New York alley because she was too blind to see the monster she married. She wrapped her arms around her massive belly, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the child kicking frantically inside her. "I'm so sorry Mommy failed you." Her vision began to blur, black spots dancing in the edges of her sight as a final monstrous wave of pain overtook her. She closed her eyes, waiting for the end. "Don't touch her, boss. She looks like a junkie. We have a meeting with the Colombians in 20 minutes. The voice was gruff, impatient, and laced with a thick Brooklyn accent. "Shut up, Gino. Look at her. She's not a junkie. She's pregnant." This second voice was different. It was deep, resonant, and carried an absolute, terrifying authority. It was the kind of voice that commanded rooms, cities, and lives without raising its volume. Penelope forced her heavy eyelids open through the blurring rain and the dim orange glow of a flickering street lamp. She saw him. He was standing over her, holding a black umbrella. He wore a bespoke, midnight blue Bryony suit that probably cost more than an average family's home. A long cashmere overcoat was draped over his broad shoulders. He had sharp, aristocratic features, a strong jawline covered in a shadow of stubble, and eyes so dark they looked like endless, bottomless pits. She didn't know it then, but she was looking at Victor Rossi, the undisputed head of the Rossi Syndicate, the most feared, ruthless Mafia boss on the Eastern Seaboard. A man who allegedly had a city councilman buried alive a month prior. "Please," she croaked, her voice pathetic and weak. "My baby. He's coming." "Oh." Gino, a hulking man with a scarred face, stepped forward, keeping his hand inside his jacket near his holster. "Victor, we can't afford a scene. Let me call an ambulance anonymously and we walk." Victor didn't look at his bodyguard. He kept his dark eyes locked on hers. He didn't look at her weight with the disgust Alfred had. He didn't look at her with pity either. He looked at her with an intense, calculated focus. "An ambulance won't make it in this traffic, and she's bleeding," Victor said calmly. He handed the umbrella to Gino and did the unthinkable. The city's most dangerous man knelt in the filthy, rain-soaked alley. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Penelope," she stuttered through chattering teeth. "Penelope," Victor repeated. "I am going to pick you up now. It will hurt, but you have to trust me." "Can you do that?" She nodded once. She had no other choice. Victor slid his strong arms under her knees and her heavy shoulders. Despite her 280 pounds, he lifted her from the wet pavement with a grunt of exertion, but didn't falter. She pressed her wet, tear-stained face against the lapel of his dry, expensive coat. He smelled of rain, expensive tobacco, and raw power. "Get the Maybach," Victor barked at Gino, his tone instantly shifting from gentle to lethal. "Call Dr. Harrison. Tell him to prep the underground suite, now." She drifted in and out of consciousness in the back of the armored vehicle. The plush leather seats absorbed her pain as Victor sat beside her, keeping a firm, warm hand pressed against her trembling shoulder. He never flinched from the blood or the fluid ruining his pristine car interior. They descended into an underground parking garage somewhere in the city. She was immediately transferred onto a gurney by a team of medical professionals waiting in the shadows. Dr. Harrison, an elite surgeon who catered exclusively to the criminal underworld, wheeled her into a state-of-the-art trauma room hidden miles beneath the bustling New York streets. The next few hours were a blur of blinding surgical lights, the beeping of monitors and excruciating pain. But every time she opened her eyes, ready to give up, Victor Rossi was standing in the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching over her like a dark guardian angel. "Push, Penelope. Doctor," Harrison urged. With one final earth-shattering scream, the pain broke. A single father named. The sound of a noon baby's cry pierced the sterile air of the operating room. "A boy," Dr. Harrison announced, quickly cleaning the infant. "Healthy. Strong." Exhausted, she fell back against the pillows, tears of pure relief streaming down her face. A nurse brought the bundle to her. She looked down at her son. He had a shock of dark hair and perfect tiny fingers. "Leo," she whispered, touching his cheek. "Your name is Leo?" The medical staff gave them a moment, stepping out of the immediate bay. Victor walked slowly toward the bed. He stopped at her side, looking down at the baby in her arms. The hardness in his eyes seemed to melt away, replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Nostalgia? Grief? "He's beautiful," Victor murmured softly. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm nobody. My husband threw me out because I'm fat and useless." "You could have walked away." Victor's jaw tightened at the mention of her husband. "My mother died in childbirth," Victor said, his voice tight. "She died because we were poor, and the doctors didn't care about a fat Italian immigrant woman bleeding out in a tenement. I swore a long time ago that I would never walk past a woman in that kind of pain." Ah! He reached out, his rough, scarred finger gently stroking little Leo's forehead. "Who did this to you?" Victor asked. The lethal edge had returned to his voice. "Alfred Pendleton," she said, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Victor nodded slowly, filing the name away in his dangerous mind. "You are not nobody, Penelope. You survived tonight. That makes you stronger than most men in my syndicate." He looked her in the eyes, his gaze piercing. "You have nothing out there. No home, no money. Am I correct?" She nodded, fresh tears welling up. "Nothing. Then you stay here," Victor stated. It wasn't a question, it was a decree. "You and Leo are under my protection now. No one touches what belongs to the Rossi family." She didn't know what it meant to be claimed by the mob. She didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She held Leo tighter against her chest. 9 years is a lifetime when you spend it in the shadows of the New York underworld. Penelope's reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the Rossi estate in the Hamptons told a story of profound transformation. She was 35 years old, and she was still fat. She had not miraculously dropped 100 pounds or starved herself to fit into a societal mold that had nearly killed her. She weighed 250 pounds, and for the first time in her entire existence, she wore every single ounce with absolute, terrifying confidence. She smoothed the rich emerald green silk of her custom-made Gucci evening gown over her wide hips and full stomach. The plunging neckline showcased the spectacular, flawless 50-carat diamond necklace resting against her collarbone, a gift from Victor for her 35th birthday. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was Penelope Rossi, the wife of the most powerful mafia boss on the eastern seaboard, and the mother to his fiercely protected heir. Victor and she had married 3 years after he pulled her from that freezing alleyway. He hadn't just saved her life, he had meticulously rebuilt her shattered soul. In Alfred's penthouse, her body was a source of endless ridicule and disgust. In Victor's sprawling fortified mansions, her body was worship. Victor, a man who ruled a violent empire with an iron fist, would kneel at her feet, kissing the stretch marks on her thighs, whispering that she was the most magnificent creature God had ever carved. He devoured her curves, demanding she eat well, live well, and never ever lower her eyes to anyone. "Mama," she turned from the mirror, but standing in the doorway of the master suite was Leo. At 9 years old, he was a striking boy, tall for his age, dressed in a sharp, miniature tuxedo that mirrored the one his adoptive father wore. Though Alfred's biology ran in his veins, Leo was every inch a Rossi. Victor had adopted him legally the week they were married, but in the eyes of the syndicate, Leo had been Victor's son since the night he cut his umbilical cord in that underground bunker. "You look handsome, my love," she smiled, walking over to adjust his bow tie. "Papa says the car is ready. He told Gino to make sure the perimeter at the plaza is secure," Leo said, his dark eyes serious. He already understood the weight of their family name. "Are you nervous, Mama?" "Not even a little bit," she said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. And it was the truth. Tonight was the night she had waited 9 years for. Downstairs, Victor was waiting in the grand foyer. At 42, the years had only sharpened his lethal edge. The silver creeping into the dark hair at his temples made him look more distinguished, more dangerous. He watched her descend the sweeping marble staircase, his dark, bottomless eyes burning with a heavy, possessive heat that made her pulse race. "You are going to stop hearts tonight, Mia Regina," Victor murmured in his raspy voice, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I only care about stopping one," she replied, a cold, vengeful smile touching her lips. Tonight, the Plaza Hotel was hosting the most exclusive financial charity gala of the decade. The city's elite, the billionaires, the politicians, and the socialites would all be there. But more importantly, Alfred Pendleton would be there. Over the last 9 years, Victor hadn't just been running his illicit businesses, he had been systematically, legally, and relentlessly dismantling Alfred's legitimate empire. It was a masterpiece of financial warfare. Victor had used shadow corporations to buy up Alfred's debts, manipulate his hedge fund's stock shorts, and poison his real estate acquisitions. Alfred didn't know it, but the anonymous European conglomerate that was aggressively hostile taking over his life was the man whose bed Penelope slept in every night. Alfred was currently on the verge of total bankruptcy. His only hope was securing a massive bailout loan tonight from a notoriously elusive private equity firm. A firm that Victor completely controlled. The ride into Manhattan was silent, charged with electric anticipation. When the armored Maybach pulled up to the plaza, Gino and a dozen of Victor's heavily armed men in sharp suits immediately secured their path. The paparazzi flashes were blinding as she stepped out of the car. She didn't shy away. She stood tall, her heavy curves draped in emerald silk, her diamonds catching the flashing lights. Victor placed a heavy protective hand on the small of her back, guiding her into the opulent ballroom. It didn't take long to spot them. Near the champagne fountain, looking significantly older and deeply stressed, stood Alfred. His hair was thinning, his posture hunched with the weight of impending ruin. Beside him was Camilla, the cruel 22-year-old fitness model who had laughed at Penelope's pain, was now 31. The years of living with a bitter, failing narcissist had taken their toll. She looked haggard, her sharp cheekbones now appearing gaunt, her eyes nervously scanning the room. Penelope took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and looked up at Victor. He gave her a slow, predatory nod. It was time. She walked deliberately across the crowded ballroom, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. The crowd naturally parted for Victor, sensing the raw, unyielding power radiating from him, even if they didn't know his face. Alfred was frantically speaking to a banking executive, sweat beading on his forehead, when she stopped directly behind him. "Hello, Alfred." Her voice was calm, melodic, and cut through the ambient noise of the gala like a silver blade. Alfred froze. He slowly turned around, his blue eyes bloodshot and desperate. When his gaze landed on her, the color completely drained from his face. His jaw literally dropped. He looked at the emerald gown, the 50-carat diamonds, the flawless makeup, and the undeniable aura of absolute power she exuded. He looked at her body, the fat body he had discarded like trash, now adorned like royalty. "Penelope," he stammered, stepping back so quickly he bumped into a waiter's tray. Camilla whipped her head around. Her eyes widened in pure shock. "Oh my God," she whispered, her gaze locked on the massive, flawless diamond ring on Penelope's left hand. "It's been a long time, Alfred," she said, taking a slow sip of her champagne. "You look tired." Alfred's shock quickly morphed into a frantic, chaotic scramble for control. His eyes darted to Victor, taking in the bespoke suit and the terrifying, silent authority of the man standing beside her. Alfred didn't recognize Victor from the alleyway. He hadn't been there, but he recognized wealth when he saw it. "Penelope, I can't believe it's you," Alfred sputtered, trying to force a charming smile that looked more like a grimace. "You look different. You're doing well." "I am," she replied evenly. "Very well." Alfred's desperation made him reckless. He stepped closer, ignoring Victor entirely, his eyes gleaming with a sudden, greedy hope. "Penelope, please, you have to listen to me. I've made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. Camilla and I. It's been over for years. We just keep up appearances." "Alfred," Camilla hissed, her face flushing dark red with humiliation. Alfred ignored her. "I've been looking for you," he lied smoothly. "I want to make things right. My firm is going through a temporary liquidity crisis, and I know you still have connections. The private equity firm we are meeting tonight, maybe your new friend here," he gestured vaguely at Victor, "could introduce us. I can give you a 20% return on any capital you confront me. We can be a team again." She let out a slow, dark laugh. It wasn't the high-pitched, nervous giggle of the terrified 26-year-old girl he used to terrorize. It was the laugh of a woman who held his throat in her hand. "A team," she echoed. "Like the night you threw me out into a freezing hurricane while my water was breaking on your Persian rug?" Alfred blanched. "Penelope, be reasonable. I was stressed." "Quiet." Victor's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it possessed a quiet, lethal violence that instantly silenced the immediate circle around them. Alfred physically flinched. Victor stepped in front of her, shielding her slightly, his towering frame dwarfing Alfred. "You do not speak to my wife unless she gives you permission. And you certainly do not lie to her. Your wife?" Alfred choked out. "Allow me to introduce myself, Mr. Pendleton," Victor said, his eyes black and devoid of mercy. "My name is Victor Rossi, head of the Rossi Syndicate, and I am the CEO of Vanguard Obsidian Equities." Alfred looked like he had been shot. Vanguard Obsidian Equities was the anonymous firm holding the keys to his bailout. It was the firm that had been ruthlessly shorting his stocks for 5 years. You, Alfred whispered, trembling violently. "You're the mob. You're Vanguard, but why? Because 9 years ago you threw my queen into an alleyway to die," Victor stated coldly. "Every offshore account you hid Penelope's family money in. My hackers drained them in 2018, every commercial property you thought you owned in Manhattan. The deeds were transferred to shell companies under Penelope's name 3 years ago. You don't own your penthouse, Alfred. You rent it from my wife. Camilla let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with her hands. She turned and practically ran toward the exit, abandoning the sinking ship. You're broke, Alfred, Penelope said, stepping out from behind Victor to look her abuser in the eyes. You are completely, utterly destitute. You owe $50 million in back taxes. And you owe the Rossi family another $30 million in loans you took from our shadow banks to keep your fraud of a hedge fund afloat. No, no, please, Alfred begged, tears streaming down his face. The arrogant billionaire was gone, replaced by a pathetic, broken man. He fell to his knees right there in the plaza ballroom, uncaring of the stares from the surrounding elite. Penelope, I'm begging you. I'm the father of your child. Where is my son? Let me see him. I have rights. At that moment, Gino, who had been standing discreetly 10 feet away, stepped forward. Beside him was Leo. Leo looked down at the weeping, balding man on the floor. His young face was an unreadable mask of Rossi stoicism. Is this the man who hurt you, Mama? Leo asked, his voice steady. Yes, Leo. That's him, she answered softly. Alfred reached out a shaking hand toward the boy. Son, I'm your father. Please tell your mother to help me. Leo didn't flinch. He looked at Alfred with cold, inherited indifference. Then he looked up at Victor. Papa, Leo said clearly, the word echoing like a gunshot in Alfred's ears. Can we go home now? This man smells like garbage, and he is upsetting Mama. Victor's mouth twitched into a proud, dangerous smile. He reached down and ruffled Leo's dark hair. Good boy. Yes, we can go home. Victor looked down at Alfred one last time. You have 24 hours to vacate Penelope's penthouse. If my men find you in the city after tomorrow night, you won't be going to a homeless shelter. You will be going into the foundations of my new casino in Atlantic City. Do we understand each other? Alfred could only sob, his forehead resting against the marble floor in total defeat. She didn't look back as they walked away. The heavy, gold-leafed doors of the ballroom opened for them, and she stepped out into the cool New York night air. She was flanked by a syndicate of lethal men, holding the hand of her brilliant son, and securely wrapped in the arm of a Mafia king who loved every heavy, beautiful curve of her body. She wasn't a chubby, useless wife anymore. She was Penelope Rossi, and she had won. Did you gasp at that final twist? Ugh! If Penelope's epic revenge on her toxic billionaire ex gave you absolute chills, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below telling us what you would have done in her shoes. And don't forget to share this story with a friend who loves a satisfying karma moment. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell for more dramatic, real-life mafia romance stories.